Now, in the reptile keeping community, it evolves and changes, and reptiles and amphibians, there's something for everyone. But I guess, other than rarer species or wild-caught animals coming in that no one's worked with and they gradually filter down, it doesn't change that much. There's just such a diversity of stuff to work with and concentrate on. For a long time now, royal pythons, corn snakes, leopard geckos, crested geckos, bearded dragons. For a lot of people, they've been the mainstay. They're like the normal reptile. But you've got so much more diversity. You've got outdoor keeping, like some of my stuff at work, a whole different league and a different world of keeping reptiles outdoors that, of course, we all think we've invented when pioneering guys were doing this stuff in the 60s. Even here in the UK, keeping all kinds of stuff from North America and Europe in outdoor enclosures. We're just reinventing the wheel, and like music, thinking we've sort of started doing something new, I guess, in a way. Something's come along. It's been sneaking up in the last few years that I think is completely different. Someone has taken on something, a project, a fascination, a passion even, for something that I don't think's really been done. And that's Lee Brindley at uk.crested.newts. Not only has he got pretty much every species of crested newt across Britain and Europe, all legally, and he breeds them in captivity. The UK ones from pre-1981 lines, which is the only way you can keep them, when the Wildlife and Countryside Act changed. But what a lot of people don't know is things like common frogs, grass snakes, slow worms, you can legally take them from the wild and keep them perfectly legally. You can't trade them or sell them or anything. But something that Lee's been working with, I honestly think no one's ever bothered, and that is the common frog, the UK common frog, which isn't that common anymore. Lee's been pioneering work with morphs of common frogs. It's fascinating because he's a pioneer. He doesn't even know what the genetics of some of these are, as in the different kinds of albinos. He's working through it, he's line breeding, and he's trying to prove out to see what they actually are. Now, I'm not that good at keeping amphibians. They take more detailed care, really, than a lot of my snakes, if I'm perfectly honest with you. But watching Lee's progress over the last few years of rearing, line breeding, genetic breeding of these animals, these coloured animals that he's finding as tadpoles that people are giving him as strange colours, it's absolutely been fascinating me, to the point, and when he puts posts on Facebook, they're probably the most interesting posts on Facebook, that day for sure. Absolutely beautiful little gems. There's a red kite that no one has worked with. So I'm going to ask Lee, really, to give us a bit of insight into what he actually is doing, what he's got, and why. So we're going to ask Lee some questions, and I'm hoping he's going to come back to us and share this pioneering passion with the rest of this community, because I think it's not only fascinating, but these things are so beautiful, almost free to keep other than the food. So in these difficult times, something that I think we could all be working with, or there certainly should be more people fascinated really by these fascinating animals that I'd say most people in the UK just go, that's just a frog. I've got this rare such and such animal from Timbuktu that I'm working with. Yeah, look at some of these things. I'm going to hopefully send us some images and videos, but we'll find out. So Lee, last time I saw you, we were talking about your great crested newt collection and your breeding project, and you gave us on my channel quite a few tips for people keeping these animals and how to keep them. And I could see your passion, and you'd really worked hard to build this collection of multiple species up. And I know how fascinated you were. But since then, the frog thing, Lee, has really, really took off. So I've got a few questions to fire at you. Number one, it's got to be why? Why did you start keeping common frogs? Did you just find a babe one in the garden? How did it go from great crested newts, which at the end of the day, in the breeding season, the males literally look like living dragons. They're as stunningly attractive as any tropical fish. Where did the lowly common frog suddenly enter your mind as a species to start working with?
Do you know what I think it is for me, Dave? To be honest, it's a bit like a midlife crisis thing. You know, I'm in my 40s now. A lot of people, as they get into their 40s, 50s, they want to do things that make them feel young again, whether it be fast cars, fast motorbikes and other hobbies, things that they used to do when they were younger, perhaps. And for me, it's doing what I used to do when I was a kid, being out on the fields, in the ponds, up to my waist in mud and smelly, horrible water and things like that. And what kids used to do, you know, back in the 80s and 90s, going out and catching frogs and newts and other animals. And the common frog is what started it all for me. I always say one of my first memories is my dad taking me to collect frog spawn from a local pond when I was knee-high to a grasshopper. And I'm still doing the crested newt thing, as you can see behind me. Still very much into that, and I've got a lot of exciting projects on the horizon with the crested newts still. But I felt in a way that I'd kind of done it. Not that I'd become the biggest expert in newts or anything like that, or that I've achieved everything. But I think one of the most exciting things for me is collecting the animals, finding them, purchasing them. It's the hunt, you know, it's trying to get them and add them to your collection. And I got to a point where I had all of the Tritoris genus. I had all of the crested and marbled newts. And as much as I still love them, I wanted another focus, something else that I could pursue. And where it all started for me with the colour morphs of the common frogs was via social media. Scrolling through Facebook one day, and I came across a post of some albino common frogs that a chap he'd actually gone and collected frog spawn from his sister's pond. Normal looking frog spawn, just as an interest, something to do as you know we used to do back in the day, as it were, as I say, like I used to do with my kids and that. Like I did with my father, you know, collecting frog spawn, rearing it at home, just that fascination in the process of hatching tadpoles and rearing them to frogs. So this chap did this. He collected the frog spawn, and as the tadpoles hatched and they started to develop, he started to notice something a little bit unusual about them. Some of them were quite pale and unusual in their coloration. And it was by the time that they reached metamorphosis, when they started to turn to frogs, he really thought, hang on, something's not right with these frogs. These aren't normal common frogs at all. And just as they metamorphose, he decided to take some photos and post it on Facebook. Saying that he was basically, his plan was to just rear them and release them, as so many people do. And when he saw the colour of them, which was a bright golden orange colour, he thought, well, you know, frogs rely on camouflage. They're green, brown colours to match their environment, and these things literally stand out like a sore thumb. He thought they're going to be no match for predators. They're going to get picked off. They won't last 5 minutes in the wild. So he shared this post to Facebook saying, you know, I don't know what to do. I've got these frogs. Are they albino? They look albino. I don't know what to do with them. I don't think I should release them because, you know, it's not fair on them without the natural camouflage. What should I do? And as soon as I saw it, it lit something up in my brain. As I say, I kept common frogs as a kid. I'd reared tadpoles many times, and that was my introduction to keeping amphibians and reptiles. So a species that's always been close to my heart. But it also triggered another memory, a childhood memory, or probably around the late 80s, early 90s, when I saw a television programme of a chap who I've later found out was probably Ernie Ibbotson, who kept some common frog colour morphs back in the 60s, 70s, 80s. until he unfortunately passed away, which was, I think, maybe the 1990s. But I saw this program, and it brought this memory back to me of seeing this television program as a kid, seeing what I now believe is Ernie's frogs, in all these fantastic different colours, and him saying that they were common frogs, but they were, for some reason, these different tropical looking colours. And it was a fascination that I had when I was a kid, and then I put away to the back of my mind because I could never get anything like that. And it was only through social media and through initially seeing this first Facebook post that, I thought it's the only way I could have any hope of getting something like that. And I saw this post and I thought I'll message the chap, tell him a little bit about who I was, that I had obviously experience in keeping amphibians and common frogs when I was a child, but more recently various different species of frogs and newts, and that I was interested, and more importantly, that I was happy to give them a forever home, as it were. I found out that it was luckily only around 45 minutes away from me, so I made arrangements to go down there and collect from him 3 beautiful bright orange froglets, and that was the whole start of it for me. Unfortunately, only one of those frogs survived, and she's still with me today, which I call Goldie. She's become a bit of a celebrity now, I think, an internet celebrity, because I've posted so many videos and posts and things of her, and whenever anybody comes and visits and sees my collection, it's one thing they always ask is, where's Goldie? And Goldie was the start of it all for me, and it was only made possible to do what I do now, with going and acquiring other colour morphs of the common frog. It was only made possible by social media and the day and age that we live in today.
Next question. When you actually produced your first unusual looking tadpoles from one of your first unusual looking frogs, I think they were albinos, but correct me if I'm wrong. When you first produced and you could see there was something different, did that kind of really hook you in? Was it exciting? Because I don't think anyone else is really working with these. So yeah, where's my question going here? Is there anyone that you know of pioneering working with a common frog and common frog morphs other than yourself? The whole morph thing exploded in reptile keeping, but I don't think anyone else is working with all these weird, beautiful colours of common frogs. Is there anyone else in your field?
Yeah, so there have been a few people before me, actually, that have worked with breeding common frogs in captivity. I've already mentioned Mr. Robertson, who was, I believe, the caretaker at St Albans Museum, and he used to have some of his albino or amelanistic frogs on display, I believe, in an upstairs room at the museum in the 70s, 80s. There was W.A. Smallcombe, who studied albino frogs and wrote a couple of scientific papers on them. He also worked with a lady called Miss Fryer, who, this is going back to just prior to the Second World War. In fact, I believe those projects got abandoned basically due to the outbreak of war. But so there were a few people that worked with breeding colour morphs of common frogs in captivity before me. And there's some great information in those texts by Smallcombe and some others. But at the same time, it's quite limited because historically, these forerunners before me were working with normally a single gene, a single mutation of the common frog. So sometimes it was quite unclear as well as to exactly what colour morphs they were working with. In some of these old texts, there's no photos, or there's only black and white photos, and sometimes it's quite difficult to establish is this person's frogs the same colour morph as this person's frogs. And I knew that obviously albino common frogs occurred, but I didn't really know what other colour morphs were out there. And once I got Goldie, my first albino common frog, which was very golden in colour, I posted quite a few photos on Facebook and other social media, And I got talking to one or two other people that also had a bit of an interest in colour morphs of albino frogs. And it led me to a hobbyist, an amphibian hobbyist in Belgium, who said he was also having a dabble with breeding albino common frogs. And I said that, I was only one of my three had survived, and I would be interested in getting some more. And he actually worked out a way of being able to send over some of his albino frogs for me. He offered me some from his breeding project. And he sent me some photos first of all. And as soon as I saw the photos, I thought, well, these don't look the same. These don't look the same as Goldie. And he said, well, they do vary quite a bit between individuals, and they can change in colour a little bit as they grow. And I thought, okay. And sure enough, I purchased these frogs, got them shipped over from Belgium. And as soon as I saw them, I thought, well, these aren't the same. This is a very different colour morph. They're really pink in colour, as opposed to Goldie, which is, of course, golden. And when I say pink, they were lacking any colour at all. The pink was from the blood vessels through the skin, which the skin was quite transparent. You could even see their internal organs and things through the side. I thought, wow, this is strange. This is completely different to what I already have. They both look like albinos, but two different kinds of albinos. And I thought, well, if there's two different kinds of albinos, I wonder what Smallcombe and Ibbotson and people before me had. Had they had pinks? Had they had goldens? Was there something different out there? And I looked through social media at all the different posts that had been shared in the wildlife pond groups and amphibian and reptile groups and things like that. And I started to realise as I scrolled, actually, I can see some orange ones, I can see an occasional pink one, I can see some that don't look like either of those. And I realised that there could be an unknown number of different colour morphs and different kinds of albino common frog out there in the wild. And it wasn't long before I found another social media post of somebody else that had found a different colour morph of common frogs in the garden. And that just snowballed then into me keeping my eyes peeled on social media, and then driving the length and breadth of the country to go and collect them from people who had found them, and were very often, like with the case of Goldie, were worried about them not being able to survive in the wild, and thinking that they'd be better off kept in captivity with someone that was prepared to look after them.
Final question. Can people access these things? Do you have a website? Are you producing enough yet that other people can share in this passion? If so, how? But very briefly, because I'm sure you've done your own videos on the channel, can you tell us a little bit about the care or some real quick care tips that stand out from tadpole to juvenile to adult? What do you feed them on in those sort of three main stages? And what can people keep them in? Indoors, outdoors, UV lighting? What works best in a nutshell? Because I think more people need to get hooked into this, because it is real low cost herptile keeping. And you're like me, Lee, we've started with these kinds of local animals as kids. We've got fascinated by tropical, rare and unusual and big maybe. And then we've gone back to our roots, and we both really love the British wildlife side of things and outdoor keeping. So thanks so much, Lee, for your contributions. And obviously there'll be a link in the description to your channel. Thanks a lot, mate.
Yeah, I think one of the real advantages of keeping common frogs and other native amphibians is that you don't need expensive heating, lighting. The electrics alone can cost a fortune these days. And by far the easiest way, I think, to keep common frogs, if you're fortunate enough to have a garden, is to keep them outdoors. And of course, many people have common frogs living wild in the gardens anyway. It's an environment that they thrive in, with just a few simple considerations to ensure that they can escape extremes of temperature. They quite happily live outdoors all year round. So I think what we'll do is I'll take you outside and I'll show you around the way that I keep them. This is the setup that I've used this year for rearing Rana temporaria tadpoles, common frog tadpoles. I had to upscale this year as I was rearing more tadpoles than in previous years. So this is a 10-foot swimming pool. It's filled with rainwater, lots of pondweed, there's some flag iris and all sorts in there, so it's effectively just like a wild pond. The advantage that this has over a normal wildlife pond is that being raised it provides some protection from predators. I created a shallow area at one end of the pool, which is important as the shallow water warms more quickly in the sun. And the tadpoles spend much time here taking advantage of the sun's warmth and UV light. They're fed on a diet of blanched spinach, kale, cucumber and goldfish pellets and flake, and with that they soon begin to grow. And once they're around half grown, the colour morphs can be easily distinguished from the darker wild type tadpoles. So these are the enclosures that I use for rearing young common frogs. They're 4 foot by 4 foot square, which probably could house a small group of adult common frogs. This is about the smallest I would recommend for housing adults. They're made of twin wall polycarbonate with this net across the roof, which is essentially to keep birds out. There's a small overhang at the top to stop the frogs from climbing out. But birds can be a nuisance. Magpies, jackdaws can take the frogs. Even sparrows can take the crickets. You see, they've got a mainly terrestrial setup with a pool to the left there. The frogs are mainly terrestrial in habit when they're not in breeding condition. They've got lots of places to hide, logs, moss, ferns to hide in. And then perhaps most importantly is what you can't see. In the middle of the enclosure, I dug down to a depth of around 2 feet and then backfilled this hole with rubble, logs, to create an underground area for them to hide. This can then be used as a kind of hibernaculum to spend the winter months, as well as escaping the heat of summer. The animals can get in here underneath this tile that you can see, and there's various cavities under there where they can hide away. It's then piled back over with logs and bark and moss. And that's really all they need in terms of housing. We'll then move on to the greenhouse, which I use for housing the adult common frogs. So the interior is designed in essentially just a larger version of what's used for the juveniles. There's a large terrestrial area and a pool. As you can see here, the frogs do enjoy spending some time cooling off, particularly in warmer weather. This is Goldie, who I mentioned before, the very first of the common frog colour morphs which I acquired. So she's now over 5 years old and quite tame as well. She really doesn't mind being handled. And then here we have on the left a flavistic colour morph, and then the other two are heterozygous, so they're carrying genes for colour morphs. And down on the bottom of the water we can see a couple more colour morphs, another flavistic up here on the land. I have a couple of stepping stones going across the pond, so if I scoot on over to the other side and have a look on the terrestrial area. So down here on the left you can see an erythristic and on the right a flavistic. And then we have this brick wall or stone wall at the back with lots of nooks and crannies where the frogs like to hide in there. And a little bench that I like to sit on sometimes and watch them. As for food, their favourite is earthworms, which they get in here, but they will eat any of the commercially reared insects, crickets, waxworms, locusts. The young frogs are reared on small crickets and fruit flies until they're large enough to take earthworms, and as soon as they get on the earthworms, that really is great food for them. The growth rate really does tend to rocket, so it's high quality food as well as a real favourite of theirs. I like to keep crickets in the greenhouse at all times and just top them up whenever they're getting low, perhaps every couple of weeks or so, and go around and throw worms to the frogs, perhaps once a week. As I say, it's quite a treat for them. They really enjoy the worms, and it also gives me an opportunity to observe each frog individually, make sure they're getting enough food and throw the worms directly to them. Actually, many of the frogs are tame enough to take the worms directly from my fingers. Here we can see a young golden albino, another flavistic on the left and another golden albino on the right. This one up on the rock is a T positive albino. And then there's Goldie, the original golden albino. So I'm still in the fairly early days of this project. I'm 5 years in, 5 years since I got Goldie. But the last couple of years I have reached a point where I've started to get produce a few surplus animals that I've been able to share with other amphibian hobbyists and other interested individuals. I just charge a small price which helps me to pay for the feed and upkeep of the animals. You can find me on uk.crested.newts on all of the normal social media, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. I'm sure Dave can put up a link to my YouTube and email, and you can contact me by email. Numbers are still fairly limited, and we're at that stage now where midsummer this year's young are starting to go off to this year's surplus young are starting to go off to their new homes. There's some left, but kind of limited availability. But at the moment, I'm just working on growing the project, working on new colour morphs, bringing on new young animals as breeding stock, and each year it's just going to get bigger and bigger. So hopefully next year I'll be able to produce more colour morphs, more surplus, as there has been quite a bit of interest, and quite rightly so, I think. As you pointed out, Dave, it's something that nobody else is really doing at the moment. Although there occasionally been albino common frogs bred in captivity, this is the biggest scale it's really been done on, as far as I can tell. And as I say, due to social media, that I've been able to work with various different colour morphs, it's given me the opportunity for the first time to see what happens when I breed two different colour morphs together. Now, I've done a little bit of that so far. The results have been varied. Some of those spawnings have just failed and the eggs haven't developed, whereas some of them have. And I found that breeding two different colour morphs together, if it does work and if the spawn is viable, it produces normally coloured offspring which carry the gene for both colour morphs. So it's what we call double heterozygous. Now, I've got some of those animals in my collection, and next year will be the first time that I'll be able to breed those double heterozygous animals together and produce what we call combination morphs, frogs that are displaying two different colour morphs in one animal. That'll be really exciting because, of course, that's been done in ball pythons, leopard geckos, some of these more commercially bred reptile species. It's never been done in common frogs before, as far as I can tell, at least. So that's on the horizon for 2026. So watch this space. Yeah, there's a lot of interesting things in the pipeline with this project, and something that hopefully will keep me busy for many more years to come.
So before we finish up, something I really need to point out, because here in the UK, certainly on reptile and amphibian groups, people spout facts, pseudo-facts, parrot fashion, one from the other, and they do no research to find out if they're talking BS or actual facts. So let me make this clear. If you're keeping higher animals with a higher protective status, such as great crested newts here in the UK, those animals have to be proven that they've been a lineage of bred animals and line bred animals that dates back to captive animals held in captivity before the law changed in 1981, the Wildlife and Countryside Act. You cannot take things like great crested newts, natterjack toads from the wild. You can't even touch them in the wild without a license, let alone take them for captive keeping. However, animals with a slightly lower protective status, like the common frog, you can legally take them from the wild and keep them. You cannot trade them, sell them, barter them in any way whatsoever if those animals were removed from the wild. However, you can sell and trade those animals if they were captive bred, as long as you can prove, so nowadays photographic video evidence, that they were captive bred. That doesn't mean you can get some frog spawn from a pond in the wild and say they're captive bred. they were taken from the wild. But as long as you can prove your animals are captive bred, they're perfectly legitimate to sell and trade. That's a fact. So always do your research. But other than that, guys, you are so privileged on this channel. With my intersections as well, it's been a lot to take in. It's been a long video. It's not for the TikToker that can't concentrate for more than 3 seconds. But this is something really special. This is something that offers mega low cost reptile keeping or herptile keeping for anyone to do, because you can keep them outside, for goodness sakes. And you can keep them indoors, but they do thrive outside. They're not difficult to keep. Go to Lee's channel. There's lots of information. Go to his Facebook group. Lots of information. Links below. These things, this is the start of something. And if you're someone that loves working with genetics and morph breeding, this truly is a new age of something that no one's done before. You can jump onto Lee's bandwagon and you too can pioneer different colour morphs. So much stuff yet that's out there in Britain and Europe. Some of these morphs that are just turning up in the wild are mind-blowingly stunning. It's just a case of getting some of those tadpoles, working with them, growing them on. This is a tip of an iceberg of what could be a collection of living gems. Hope you've enjoyed the video. Catch you soon. Thank you so much for watching.